What we need is sort of more companies like Apple stepping into the market in 2007 with a brand new product called the iPhone.
So, Fredrik, for what reasons have Western economies become less innovative?
I think they've sort of gone through a period of pretty profound change in the way that the composition of the economies of the West have been organized. But I think sort of one of the big differences between now and if we go back sort of 40, 50 years in time is that we now have a lot of institutions that own our big companies in both America and Europe. And many of these institutions don't really act in a way that encourage experimentation, long-term investments. They want to have predictable returns. And these are institutions managing other people's money, and they don't like to go into companies that sort of look for long-term profits. They want to have investments with short life cycles. And that is sort of a capitalist culture which is difficult to marry with real, genuine breakthrough or radical innovation, where you have to experiment. You have to experiment with technology. You have to experiment with corporate organizations. You have to experiment with markets. But we now have institutional owners that control a good part of the big listed companies in the West, and they would like to have a capitalism which is predictable. And innovation cannot be predictable. Innovation is about something that is uncertain.
So has this deterred investors away from Western economies?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of investors in Western economies, but what we have now, more than we had in the past, is a type of investors which is much more portfolio oriented. So we have large chunks of money going into the corporate sector, going into household sector, the government sector, etc. But these are not investors that invest in order to build long-term economic value. We have a lot of different investors that manage other people's money. They want to have a safe, predictable return in the short term. What we lack in Western economies generally are the type of entrepreneurs that try to create long-term economic value through innovation and that manage to raise capital and external funds for it. And I think it's that type of investment that we are desperately lacking in the Western economies. At least we have seen that over the past decades or so, it's other forms of portfolio investors which have taken up a much larger share of corporate ownership. And if you have sort of majority control, or if you have the largest shareholder in a company, which is a pension fund or a sovereign wealth fund or something similar, that's going to be very sort of it's going to be very difficult in order to get the funding you need as a company to build long-term economic value, either through innovation or by other means.
So what can we do to reverse this stalemate in Western economics?
Well, I think there are a lot of things we can do. I mean, one thing we really have to focus far more attention on that we've done over the past years is that both America and Europe are going through a very deep productivity crises. If you look at the European economy, for instance, you can say that from the early 1970s, we have effectively shaved off 1 percentage unit of productivity growth per decade. So we started in the 1970s with a productivity growth in the region of 4% every year, going down to 3% in the 1980s, 2% in the 1990s, and now we're basically at a point where we have no productivity growth in our economies at all. And if we don't have any productivity growth, it's going to be enormously difficult to generate any other type of growth in the economy that we'd like to see, for instance, economic growth. So we need to have renewed attention to underlying structural problems in Western economies that hold back our ability to behave smarter and more productive every year. I think we need to do many other things as well to open the space for far more competition, to open up markets for more contestable competition, the type of almost life and death type of competition that we've seen on some markets that really shake things up and make economies to behave not just more productive, but they take economies also in a far more innovative direction. What we need is sort of more companies like Apple stepping into the market in 2007 with a brand new product called the iPhone, and suddenly a few years later, the company that was the most valued company on earth when Apple stepped in with iPhone, Nokia, was basically outcompeted from the market. That's a good form of competition because it generates a lot of change, a lot of innovation, and an economy where people behave smarter.
So what other innovative steps need to be made to wake up the markets?
Well, I mean, hopefully we are going to have a corporate sector faced with far more competition, and not just sort of regular day-to-day competition, but far more innovation competition that is going to force them to become more bold, more radical, and try to change the markets where they operate.
Well, thank you, Fredrik, for speaking with me today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And thank you at home for watching. Don't forget to click on our channel for more interviews like this. Goodbye for now.